everyone, I'm Bria and welcome to my channel Tales of Tales. So today we're going to be unhauling some books because I have way too many. So I recently did a video on my channel where I went through all of my unread books, and let's just say it was a lot. And I also recently did a book haul, so you know, something isn't adding up there. So for the math to math, I need to do an unhaul. And so today I'm going to be unhauling 46 books. And so the way that I'm going to be organizing this video is that I'm going to organize the books by where I will be unhauling them. So for this unhaul, I will be unhauling my books at 3 different places. The first one is my local library. The second one is an organization called Books Between Bars that helps get books to prisoners. And the third one is going to be Little Free Libraries, which I will talk about once I get there. So let's start with the books that I'll be donating to my local library. So when I was deciding what books to donate to my local library, I definitely went on the site to see what, criteria they had to donate. My local library didn't really have that big of a criteria as long as the books were like in good condition. So when I was going through my shelves, I really picked books that were hardcover books that I essentially haven't read yet. A little bit of shame there, but I have a total of 13 books that I will be unhauling to the library. So let's start with fantasy books that I'll be donating to the library. So first up is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. This was one of the first books I pulled off my shelf to unhaul. I read this a few years ago and I just really didn't like it. I think I ended up giving it like a 2-star or 2.5 star. This book follows like the main character who is like trying to find her sister, I think, in this carnival game type of situation, but the reason I didn't like it was because of the magic system. It was a very open-ended magic system and I just don't really like that. I like my magic systems with set rules. So this is going to be the first book that I'm going to be unhauling. Up next is A Wild Winter Swan by Gregory Maguire, and this is like a retelling of Wicked. This was a book that got sent to me by like a PR team or PR package or something like that, and it wasn't something that I necessarily asked for and it's not something that I'm interested in reading, so this is going to be another book that I will be unhauling to the library. Up next we have The Diabolic by S.J. Kincaid. So I picked this book up maybe like in the beginning of like my book community intro. I was just starting out on BookTube and I was just starting out on Bookstagram, and I had seen this cover and I was like, ooh, that seems cool, but then I realized that I had no idea what it was about and that I really wasn't that interested in it. I just really liked the cover because butterflies are cute, even though this butterfly has some sharp wings on it. And then up next we have Beast and Beauty, Dangerous Tales by Soman Chinani. Another book that was sent to me in a PR package that I did not necessarily ask for, but I feel like somebody at the library will definitely enjoy this. I think it is a like middle grade book, but it does have like some illustrations in it. I think it'd just be a good book to donate to the library since I know that I am not going to be reading it. Up next we have Dark Stars by Daniel Rollins, and the back of this just says, "Destiny fulfilled, a girl on the run, a love that must stand the ultimate test of time." And I know that this deals with like time travel, and time travel is something in general that I'm interested in, but in this context I just don't think it's going to be for me, so I'm just going to rehome this. All right, and then the last fantasy book that I will be unhauling to the library is Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard by Rick Riordan. So this book I was actually really interested in reading for a while, and I do plan on doing like a middle grade vlog sometime soon, but this is another book that I've just had for like 3 years, and I picked it up at the Strand, and they have like a cart up front or outside of their store in New York where they have like dollar books, $2 books, and so I think I found this on the $2 rack. Oh yeah, the $3 rack. I just have no interest in reading it, even though I do have some middle grade I want to read. Those are middle grades that I'm like actually excited about. Okay, up next I have 2 nonfiction books that I'll be donating to the library. The first one is The Cost of Living by Emily Maloney. Another one unsolicited. This book literally follows like what the title is. It's like the cost of living in America, especially when it comes to like healthcare and like if you have to go to the hospital, and how a lot of people can't afford that. And you know, that's something that I probably should be reading up on, but sometimes reality of like how we live in America and like how much healthcare costs, like I just know it's gonna be really depressing, and I'm just gonna pass. And then up next for nonfiction, we have Aftershocks by Nadia Awaso. So this follows a young woman whose dad is an official to the United Nations, and so she ends up having to move around a lot. And I think it just follows like her life of one, being mixed race, and then just like having to move around a lot and just feeling like she doesn't really have like a stable home. So I really don't read memoirs that often, and when I do, it's usually for someone that I'm like familiar with and someone that, you know, I already have like an interest in their lives, and I really don't know who this is. And so just knowing that I rarely read memoirs as is, I just feel like this would be better homed somewhere else. Okay, and then up next we just have some general fiction. And so this first book I'm going to talk about is Cobble Hill by Cicely von Zegasar. So this author is actually the author that wrote Gossip Girl. I was very interested in it, but I read it and I absolutely hated it. It was a 2-star read. It didn't really have a plot and the characters were boring. So I was like, what's the point of this book? And so to make it even better, the publisher sent me 3 copies of this book. I have one of these is like the ARC. One is like a finished paperback, and then the other one is obviously like the hardback. So everybody's getting a copy of Cobble Hill, the library, the prison, the free little libraries. Everybody's gonna get a copy of this book because I hated it and the publisher sent me way too many copies of it. Up next we have Lenora in the Morning Light by Michaela Carter. And it just says, this is not the story of a great man's woman, this is the story of the great woman. And it talks about like the 1940s and 1930s, and that time period alone, I'm just uninterested. It sounds like historical fiction, and historical fiction is probably my least read genre. It's just not something that I generally enjoy. Unless it has something to do with like Greek mythology, and this doesn't, and so it's a hard pass for me. Up next we have The Last One by Alexandra Olivia, and I originally bought this book for a video that I was going to do, and this video I was going to do was something I planned to do when I first started my channel, and as my channel is just like evolving and I'm figuring out like what type of videos and stuff I want to make, this book just doesn't really like fit into that. And I did read the first chapter of this book and I was like, oh no, I can't do it. But for anybody interested, this book just follows like a woman who's like trying to survive in like the wilderness for a reality TV show. And that sounds intriguing to me because I like survival reality TV shows, but I just don't think this is going to be a book that is going to be for me. So I'm donating it because, again, it's also been on my shelf for like 3 years, so it's got to go. Up next, we have The Council of Animals by Nick McDonald. Again, unsolicited books. So if you are a publisher, I just really think they should just do a better job of making sure that people like actually want the books before they send them, because then to me it's just like a waste of money and, you know, a waste of resources to be sending it to someone that doesn't necessarily want it. And this just says, a captivating fable for humans of all ages, dreamers and cynics alike, who believe, if nothing else, in the power of timeless storytelling. And then the last book that I'll be donated to the library is Kings County by David Goodwill. And this just follows a young woman who is moving to Brooklyn in the early 2000s. And honestly, this just feels like very like realistic fiction. And because I did live in New York for 5 years, I kind of just know the realities of it. And so it's just kind of like, well, if I already lived it, I don't know if I necessarily like want to read it. So the next group of books I'll be donating will be for Books Between Bars, which is an organization that helps send books to prisoners. And so Books Between Bars is specifically one that's like close to a prison in my area. So there are actually a lot of organizations like this for various areas. I found this one through an article on Book Riot. So if I can find it again, I'll link it down below. But make sure that you are checking the specific organization's website, because some of them do tend to look for specific genre of books. And also another criteria is that about 99% of these organizations only take paperback books. So I'm ending up donating 6 books to Books Between Bars, and the organization I'm donating to was looking for true crime, mystery thrillers, and science fiction fantasy. So I'm only donating 6 books because I also want to donate things that were in decent condition. So first up, I have one like science fiction fantasy, and that is Escaping Exodus by Nikki Drayden. So I know a couple people have been reading this lately, but I just have so much science fiction fantasy on my shelves right now that I just know that I'm probably not going to get to this one anytime soon. And just the way that I prioritize fantasy and sci-fi, I know that I'll end up picking up more books in this genre, and this isn't something that is just like sticking out to me in my mind. So I figured that someone else could get better use of it. And then the other 5 books that I'm going to be donating are mystery thrillers. So the first one is Swipe Right for Murder by Derek Millman. So I did go to BookCon like 2 or 3 years ago, 4 years ago maybe. And you know, so when I first got this, I was interested in picking it up because it is about a murderer, I think, who finds his victims via like dating apps. And while that sounds interesting, it also sounds very terrifying as someone who dabbles in dating apps here and there, giving real Tinder swindler vibes. Yeah, I mean, this is probably like a great book, but again, I just know that I'm not going to get to it. Up next, we have Where the Truth Lies by Anna Bailey. This is a book that I'm actually interested in reading, but I got sent a final copy in a hardback. So I figured I would donate this one to Books Between Bars since I don't need 2 copies of the same book. And this is a literary crime novel. So while I couldn't donate true crime, this is still in the crime genre, so hopefully someone will be able to enjoy that. Up next, we have Falling by TJ Newman, another book that the publisher also sent me a finished hardback copy. It says, you just boarded a flight to New York. There are 143 other passengers on board. What you don't know is that 30 minutes before the flight, your pilot's family was kidnapped. For his family to live, everyone on your plane must die. The only way the family will survive is if the pilot follows his orders and crashes the plane. Enjoy the flight. And so I read one other book that had to deal with like a plane crash or like a plane hijacking, and that was Before the Fall, I believe. And I think I gave that 3.5 stars, but I liked the like idea of like a plane hack, even though in America it could be a little traumatizing for some people. But I'm glad that I got 2 copies of this, so now I can donate this paperback arc to Books Between Bars. Up next, we have The Other Side of the Door by Nikki French. This just says, when Bonnie Graham arrives at her boyfriend's apartment in London, she is horrified to discover a dead body in a pool of blood on the floor, but she doesn't call the police. Bonnie hides the corpse and obliterates any evidence she was there. So it seems like it's a little fishy, like, girl, why don't you just call the police? So this sounds interesting, but I'm also going to be donating it. And you know, a lot of times when you're donating books, or you're donating anything, you also have to think like the people who you are donating them to, or where these books are going to end up, they also want to have a good time. And so I'm not always just going to donate books that just sucked. You should still want to donate things that are valuable and you know that people are actually going to enjoy. So I definitely think that someone will enjoy this one, so I am glad I'll be able to donate it. However, speaking of books that sucked and that I hated, we have The Silent Wife by A.S.A. Harrison. So I actually DNF'd this book. I went into it with like not a lot of expectations. I think I thought it was going to be closer to like a Gillian Flynn book, which I think the idea is kind of like that because it's like a domestic thriller between like a wife and a husband. And I think I got maybe halfway through it and I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And I usually don't DNF books, especially if I'm already like halfway through. I'm like, well, I've already spent the time and I'm going to keep reading it, but I just couldn't do it with this one. So this one is going to be donated, but hopefully someone else enjoys it it just wasn't for me. And so the last book that will be going to Books Between Bars is Have You Seen Me by Kate White. So this is about a woman who like goes into her work office and her boss is like, girl, you haven't worked here in 3 to 5 years. The woman remembers her name and like not really much else about her life. So it seemed interesting to me, but as my like reading tastes have like progressed and changed, it's just not something that I'm gonna like gravitate towards to pick up. Again, this has been sitting on my shelf for I know at least 2 years, so I just figured it was time to part with it. Okay, and so the last group of books I have will be donated to little free libraries, which I'm so excited to film that video whenever I find some time to do so. So for those of you who don't know, little free libraries are exactly what they sound like. So people build these like little boxes that kind of look like birdhouses, and they either put them near schools or parks or even like in front of their house, where you can like donate a book and then also take a book out of it as well. So when I go, I doubt that I'll be taking a lot of books out of them, because that's the whole point of this, is to get rid of books. And where I live, there is a lot of little free libraries in the area, so I'm super excited about that. But I have a total of 24 books that I think I'm going to put in the little free libraries. However, as I was going through some more of these, there's a couple that I might end up donating to the prison. When I originally sorted these out, I was going to donate them to a different prison system that wasn't looking for fantasy and sci-fi. But since the one that I did decide to donate is looking for that, there's a couple of these that I might include in that unhaul. But for now, I'll just go through them as I originally had them sorted out. So with that, let's talk about fantasy and sci-fi first. First up, City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. Another one that immediately got ripped off my shelves when I knew I was going to do this unhaul. I despised this book, hated it, gave it 2 stars. Really, it could have been 1 star. I also watched the movie, also tragic, also horrible. I understand people have a lot of sentimental, emotional tie to this series, but I read this like in adulthood and I was just like, no, absolutely not. So this will be going in a little free library. I'm sure someone will be happy to pick it up. Up next on books I didn't like was Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice. I tried to read this a couple times. I got halfway through it and I was like, I can't do it anymore. I just can't. I can't. And this was one of like my first indicators that I didn't like books that dealt with vampires anymore. Like, I like the idea of vampires. I can watch them in shows and things like that, but I just don't think reading them is my jam. But the next book is Shatter Me by Tahara Mafi. This book, when I first got on BookTube and Bookstagram, this book was everywhere. This series was everywhere. So I was like, you know what? I gotta pick it up. You know, because I want to be in the know. I want to be in the cool kids group. But the older I get, the more I'm like, I have no interest in reading this. And I know that I'm never going to get to it. There are some other books by Tahara Mafi that I'm kind of interested in, but I haven't read anything by her yet, but it's just definitely not going to start with this one. So this one is saying bye-bye. And so these next 2 books, I'm hoping that I can find a little free library that caters more to like middle grade aged, and so I'll be donating the Fly Girl series, and this one is Fly Girls Makai the Good Girl, Fly Girls Lux the New Girl. This is following a girl who she's new at school and she's just like trying to find her place there. And then the Good Girl, this one is about like a young girl who, you know, she has everything going for her. She has like a really good family, you know, she enjoys school, all of that. And she's kind of labeled like as a good girl, but like, does she want to be labeled that? So I would love to find a little free library that caters to this age range to donate these to. Up next, when it comes to series, and someone is gonna love me for donating the series, I already know it, and that is the Cinder series by Marissa Meyer. So I read the first Cinder book and I enjoyed it, but I read it at a point where I think I've already aged out of this type of story. And so I have all 3 because I believe I was gifted these because I thought it was going to be a series that I just like absolutely was obsessed with. And while I enjoyed Cinder, it really wasn't something that I think I'm going to continue reading. And I also considered just keeping it so that I would have it in like my library just in case someone ever wanted to read them. But the fact that I know I'm not gonna read them, I couldn't in good nature recommend them to anybody or lend them out to people if I haven't read them yet and I had no intention of reading them. So I figured that they could be rehomed and someone else will, I'm sure, will enjoy these. But I'm gonna try to speed through these next couple of books because this video is already way too long. And so the next book I'll donate is Sure, I'll Be Your Black Friend, Notes from the Other Side of the Fist Bump. Another book that I got unsolicited. This is by a black author. When I first read this title, I was like, I don't know. So it's gonna be donated to a little free library. And then a big chunk of these next books are just like general fiction. First up, we have Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. It's not a book that it like really stuck with me. It's not a book that, you know, really means a lot to me. I know that this book touched a lot of people as well as like the movie, but it just wasn't something that I really connected with. And then these next three books are books that I got as part of like a giveaway. There was like one other book in this giveaway that I was really interested in, and honestly I wasn't expecting to win, but I did win. But it's like a group of short books. They're not connected, but I'm just showing them all to you because I got them at the same time. The first one is How to Order the Universe, and I know that this deals with like a girl whose father was like a traveling salesman. Then we have The Album of Dr. Moreau, and I know this is like about a band, like a musical band, but the band is like animals of some sort, and so it feels kind of trippy. But it's not something that I'm necessarily interested in. And then up next we have Justine by Forsyth Harmon, and this is literally just like a regular like general fiction novel, it seems like, and I just have no interest, so I'm donating it. Up next on the train of I didn't ask for these is Love Like That by Emma Duffy Camperone. It just says the stories in Love Like That are funny and raw and bright-hearted. This author acknowledges the people we want to be and puts crosshairs on the people we are and the places we are loved nonetheless. General fiction usually just isn't my jam because it just doesn't feel very like plot driven, and it's just not something I'm interested in. This is What Doesn't Kill You by Tessa Miller. This book does say it's a life with chronic illness, lessons from a body in revolt. So this was something I did really originally want to read, but I have some other books on my shelf that kind of deal with like chronic illness that I'm just a little bit more interested in reading. And I think this is something that someone will enjoy from a little free library that they will get some value out of. And this cover is absolutely like beautiful with like the ribs and like the flowers and stuff. Next up is Good Eggs by Rebecca Hardiman. So the publisher actually gifted me like 3 copies of this, one to keep, one to do a like giveaway for, and then they like accidentally sent me like a 3rd copy, I believe. So I have 1 copy, gave away another copy, and then I'm gonna donate this one. This was pitched as like an Irish version of Schitt's Creek, which I love the show Schitt's Creek, so I was like, oh yeah, send this to me, I'll read it. I still haven't gotten around to reading it, but I feel like this is also just another one that someone will enjoy and I had multiple copies of, so it's gonna get donated. Up next is Broken in the Best Possible Way by Jenny Lawson. I did see this book a couple times when I was doing my book shopping vlog. I saw a couple copies of this at Half Price Books, so I know that someone in a little free library is going to like this. Then we have Tripping the Velvet by Sarah Waters, and this is more of like historical fiction, I believe, and like I said, historical fiction just isn't something that interests me. It has to be like a very niche part of like historical fiction, and this isn't it, so that is that on that. Up next we have Bombshells by Serena Bowen. I'm pretty sure this is in a male perspective of like a hockey player, and he's like, I'm gonna focus just on like myself and hockey. I'm not gonna focus on like sex, drugs, and women. But then he meets like a female hockey player and he's like, wait a second, maybe I'm gonna change that up a little bit. I mean, it sounds like a romance, which like I'm sometimes interested in romances, but I don't know anything about hockey, and unless there was something else that was intriguing me on top of the hockey element, this wasn't something that I was probably gonna enjoy, so I'm going to donate that one. Then we have Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. I read this and I enjoyed it, but it's not something that I'd ever like pick up again. And I don't know if it's something that I would automatically recommend to people, you know. And I have some other John Green on my shelves. I think I have The Fault in Our Stars and Looking for Alaska. And I'm going to give those books a little bit more time because I am still interested in them. But probably if I don't read those two books in the next like year and a half, those are eventually also going to get unhauled. Then we have American Delirium by Bettina Gonzalez. This one also is like an animal type of fiction, but I know it's a little bit more like eerie, I guess, because there's like a mysterious like hallucinogen that is dealing like with animals and like people in a small town, which sounds intriguing, but just knowing realistically if I'm going to get to it or not, I know that I'm not. All right, and then I have just 3 more books left in this unhaul. The first one is The Wives by Taryn Fisher. I was thinking about giving this one to the library, but I also wanted to include some things in the Little Free Library that were like hardbacks as well. And so this book I did get in a Book of the Month box back when I was subscribed to Book of the Month, but I'm unhauling this one because I've heard nothing but bad things about it. But I'm hoping that someone maybe wants to read this in a Little Free Library and that they find some joy in picking it up. Next up is Strangelets. I originally got this from a library in New York, and the library is doing like a book sale. And so I was trying to pick up things that I had never heard before, you know, I was trying to be unique or whatever. But joke's on me because I just never read it and I hauled this like 5 years ago. And this just says 17-year-old Sophie lies on her deathbed in California, losing her battle with cancer. 17-year-old Declan stares down 2 armed thugs in a back alley in Galway, Ireland. 18-year-old Anna is caught in a booby-trapped tunnel between Israel and Egypt. Says all 3 strangers should have died at the exact same moment, thousands of miles apart. Instead, they awaken together in an abandoned hospital only to discover that they're not alone. And so just reading the inside flap, I was like, that sounds really interesting. And I've never heard anybody talk about it. I'm going to pick it up, but I'm not going to get to it. If I haven't gotten to it in the last 5 years, I know that I'm not going to get to it anytime soon. And then the last book I have is Here With Me by Samantha Young. This is just so thick. A lot of thick books really intimidate me. And I think this technically falls into, I think it's technically like general fiction, but it has like murder mystery like elements or like thriller mystery elements in it. And while I'm always interested in mystery thrillers, this one I just know deals with the rich and famous, which sometimes intrigues me. But the fact that I'm very on the fence about the synopsis in general, and then it's like almost 500 pages, I'm like, no. But maybe someone with a little bit more stamina will be able to get through this book. All right, and so that wraps up this book unhaul. Let me know if there's any books in this pile that maybe I should keep and that I should second guess if I should read them or not. Also, let me know if you donate books, where you donate them, so that maybe I can also get some additional ideas for my next unhaul. And if you made it to the end of this video, you are my favorites. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.